Hello, this is Akash Chauhan, and in today's lecture, we will focus on how to create a little advanced stress-based application. In our previous lecture, we have seen a little basic application, but in today's lecture, we will add more features to the application we have created in the last lecture. So, in today's lecture, our focus would be on how to create a form validation in a trust-based application, and also when to implement uh, action interface and when to extend the action support class. Okay, because they would be providing you almost similar methods. Okay, and they are all interfaces and the uh, classes from the stress framework. Okay, but so far we have seen only how to extend the action support class, and there would be execute method or calculate method where we can write our business logic, and for that particular method we can use that reference in a stressed.xml file. So in this project as well, majority file names and uh, the code is almost similar. It just we have added few new features. Okay, so what I meant by saying how to validate a form and how to use the action and action support class. Action is actually the interface, and action support is the abstract class. So, in what sense, when you implement action interface, there would be some methods, okay? And when you extend action support class, there would be some different methods or the same. We will look into it, but let me first execute the project, and we will see the flow of our the execution of the project. So if I run this over the server, okay, just hold on for a second. Okay, so as you can see, it is providing me the default resource is something which we are not able to see as of now, but let's say it is index.jsp or input.jsp. As you can see, it is input.jsp or result.jsp. So in WebXML, okay, we have given it for any resource. If there is no default resource is being added into the URL, then please check for input.jsp or default.html inside the web content folder. So it will figure out that okay, default.html is not there, but input.jsp is there. So it will return you the input.jsp. So input.jsp is being returned by this line. Okay, because every request would first come to the WebXML file. So what is the form validation? Form validation is, let's say if I simply write this and I write something like 10,000, which is like big numbers, and the name wouldn't be the same. If I submit it, okay, it is saying okay, it would accept the name like this, but it would say age must be between 20 to 65. Or let's say the second thing is what we can do with the form validation. If I don't write anything in the name and the age, then if I submit it is saying that okay, the name is required and the age must be between 28 to 65. It means if I write simple name and choose a date between 28 to 65, let's say 30, if I click on submit, it would return me somewhere. Okay, it is actually returning you the result.jsp. It is saying the employee information is captured successfully. That is what you are able to see over here. So it means for the success result, it is returning you the result.jsp. Okay, that is what you are able to see. And the web XML is returning you for the index file, for the default resource file, it is returning you input.jsp. So what would be the execution flow? Okay, what would be the execution flow? All the requests first come to the web XML file, then all the requests would go to the stress.xml. Okay, there is one action written over there, but we'll come to that action later on. First, let's understand this is actually the same file I have used for previous project. This was the previous. our previous project. So simply what you can do, simply go to web content, webinf, simply open it, copy and paste it in your new web.xml file. It would do the same because we have used the same resources, the default resources, and the input.jsp as well we have used same. And this is actually the library it would consider for the stress framework. Okay, it will filter out that all the request except this default request would or should go to the stress to filter. And what is the stress to filter? It is from this class. Okay, and this class would automatically forward all the requests from here to stressed.xml. And then all the requests, if they would come here, okay, it means now this part of the this part of this file is actually deciding if this employee information is being called, then go to this class which is inside com.acast.stress2, right, package, and then execute the execute method there. And whatever the execute method would return, just evaluate it and see for that particular string what do I need to return. So if the execute method would return success, then this XML file would decide, okay, the view is actually resolve.jsp. So this is called the view resolving MVC, model, view, and controller. So model would be this employee class is the model which would have the execute method. In this execute method, we have written our business logic. Okay, so if this emp info is being called, okay, through any resource, okay, we will see where this particular name is used in which file. Okay, so somehow this name is being invoked or called. Okay, so in that case the xml file is suggesting go to this class, and execute method is the business logic, perform that business logic, the container would perform the business logic, and whatever the execute method would return, on that basis the xml file is deciding, okay, which view to resolve to the customer. So this is the same xml file we have used. What we have changed, we have changed the location because it earlier it was something else, sum of something, sum of two numbers, the name of this class was different, the package is different. So you, what you need to do, simply copy paste the xml file of your previous project over here, change this, change this to execute instead of calculate, change this, and you can use anything in the name of package name. It wouldn't make any difference. Only this these three information should be correct: the name of the action, the package or the class the container would found, and the execute method. It, you can take it the same. So this is about the xml file. So if we are hitting, let's say, this, let me refresh it. Okay. Okay. So if this is actually the simple input.jsp, right? This is, if you can see, this is the this is the form we are using. Okay. In that, in this form, actually, if you click over this submit button, okay, this submit button, if you click over it, it would it would forward you to the emp information. It means whenever you click, whenever you get the information and click on submit button, click over here. So the input.jsp is saying that, come to the input.jsp, it is saying if you click on submit, then perform this action. And where this action definition would be, it would be inside struts.xml. It means first this input page here is returned by web.xml. It would not forward it to the struts.xml, okay, which is not required. But if I enter some information over here, let's say, and if I click over submit, okay, then what will happen? Let's go to the input. So it is saying that use strust, S colon means use strust, because this form is of a strust type. We have provided this strust tag S, as you can see. It is saying whenever you take the information from this form, use at strust variable and strust form. which would be later on used somewhere. If we don't use it, it will not be mapped into the file we will be adding over there. Okay, why I'm saying that, if you are using, what is happening over here, it is mapping this name, okay, whatever you would enter, and age to this employee.java file. In this we have name and age, which would use, your container would use set function, set age, and the set name, okay, to set these variable values. Okay, so if you're using this s colon form, s colon text field, name and age, you are setting the java object variables. Okay, so the container would create the object file of this employee.java class. Okay, and whatever you enter over here, okay, the container job is to map all these values, name or age, to the java object. Okay, so now the java object using the set method, okay, the container would set all these values to the java object. So now in the container there would be a live java object of employee class, which would have the information of the employee name and the employee age. And till the container would have this object, we can manipulate, we can use all these values. Okay, so it is the job of the container to create this, to manage all these values. Okay, so we are talking about the validation part. Okay, so as of now, if we click on submit, it is saying saying the stress form. Okay, it is saying the stress file that perform this action. So it means, if you click on submit, if you don't use it, it will not forward you to the stress.xml. Okay, it is only forwarding you because you are using a stress, this prefix over here, okay, s colon. So it will forward you, it will find this employee information in stress.xml file. It will say perform this action. So we can have many such actions over here like this. Okay, so it will find appropriate action among all these. So you can make it 2, 3, and 4. So let's say this XML file for the same package name would have 4 action type. Okay, but the container would find that, okay, we need to execute this action. Okay, the stress XML file is saying that you need to execute this this action. Okay, and to execute this action, what do you need to do? Simply go to this package. There is a class attached to it. Okay, is classes employee, and in that there is a execute method, and whatever the result of this execute method would be, come to this file once again and check what is returned by the execute method. If the execute method returned inside employee class is success, then return result.jsp as a view to the client, final view. If your execute method would return input, then return input.jsp, again it would return you the same form you are able to see. Okay, it means in case of failure it would return input, in case of success it would return success, which is further used to decide, okay, which view to return to the client. Okay, so if I simply save it, okay, you can change all these classes and name, but here our focus is only the employee information, because this is being used inside the JSP file with s.colon, means it is not a simple form, it is a trust based form, which is actually forwarding you to the trust.xml file. Okay, so this is the flow of the execution. Let me remind this flow once again. All the requests first come to the web XML file except the default resource. Once you enter the detail in the default resource, again a URL will be generated, and then it is decided by the web XML file that all the URL, okay, all the URL except this default, I will forward it to the stress2 filter. And stress2 filter means this is stress.xml file. So then the input with all those values, okay, all those values with a name and age would come to this package. Okay, and in that package there is a particular object which is similar to the input.jsp, which would store the values of actually age and name of the employee as a variable, right? Employee, in the employee class we have age and name. So it would store till this object is alive, okay? In the container it will store the value of age and employee, which can be further used for the manipulation and store can be stored in the database as well. And then struts.xml file, according to this action, why this action will be performed, because input, this input.jsp file is saying you, whenever you click on submit, it perform this action as a, as it is a stressed prefix, so it will forward you to the stress.xml file, and in that it will match, okay, this is the action I want to perform, the container should perform. And how to perform it, go to the appropriate class in which you have returned the execute method. Okay, let's come to this employee class, and in employee class we have name and age. Okay, and all these getter and setter methods are there. How you create the getter and setter method, simply right click anywhere and go to the source, and there is a getter and setter method. I have already created, or it is saying you have already created. If I delete all those methods, okay, let's say if I delete all those methods and if I click again on source, it is saying getter and setter method. You simply choose both of the variables. It would create public getter and set method for you. So it has created getter and set method. But how about these two methods? Okay, the execute method and the validation. We will come to the validation method later on. But first, let's look at the execute method. As I told you, there are two options. Either you can use action support class, or you can actually, this is actually a class. Okay, this is actually a class, and for a class you need to extend it, but there is a method called execute. If I simply click on it, okay, and if I want to look at what kind of method it has, okay, so there are three important methods which is very useful for us. The first one is the execute method, and second one is the validation method. Okay, this validate method, okay, which we have actually overwritten. We have overwritten all these methods. See, we these two methods are very important for us in case of uh, having the business logic. Logic would go into the execute method, and the validation would go into the validate method. Okay, so these are the default method. If you are extending these method, it means the employee class here, it's supposed to implement, sorry, extend or give the definition to all these methods. Okay, so what is the difference if I simply, I would not extend the class, but instead if I use action interface, and in case of interface you have to implements, right? It would ask you to import it from the library, so let me import it. Okay, so the same way we can perform, okay, this can also be done, okay, because the action interface would have, let I show you. Action interface has some variables. These are the variables, and this is actually the execute method. Okay, the execute method is also inside the action interface. So either we implement action interface, or we extend the action support class. They would do the same purpose. They would help us to give the business logic inside the execute method. So this is already there. See, this is already there, and these are actually our private variables, so we can add more variables and methods. So these getter and setter method is actually the extended method and the variables. But the important method in case of action interfaces, execute method, which we are providing the definition of. But there is no validate method. That is why it is showing you the error. So it is not able to find the definition because it is not mandatory. It is not able to find this method. So if I simply erase this, okay, if I simply delete it, and if I save it, okay, see what kind of problem it would generate for us. So what I'll do now, I'll execute the program once again. Earlier we have used action support class. Now we are using the action interface. Okay, so just hold on. So it would forward us to the default resource import.jsp, where there would be a slight difference because, so if I enter something, see, if I simply enter, okay, if I submit it, oh, it is working fine. Then what is the difference? So if I simply don't insert anything or put insert any invalid value, then still it is also saying that okay, employee information is captured, because we have not performed any validation. Because in action interface there is no concept of validation. The action support class, let me come to that point, the extend action support class. So in this action support class, if I go to this class and check what kind of method it would provide, so it would provide us validate method, and also to execute our business logic, the execute method. So the action support class is enough, which is actually advisable to use when there is a validation. Okay, you can create your own validation in the business logic. Let's say if you simply check the values of all these things, but it is not that fast and appropriate and not suggested, because business logic is meant to execute the business logic your application is all about. So if I simply write the business logic inside the execute method, and in the validate method, if I can check the form validation, it would be great. So what it is doing, it is checking name and age. If name is null, or if the user has entered nothing, then again show this message over uh, the box where you are about to write your, where you have written the name, okay, in the JSP page. And again, if your age is less than 28 and greater than 65, it would say the age must be between 28 and 65. There is a one simple catch is here is, if, see, if there is a invalidation, okay, the validation method is saying okay, it is failing over here, it has passed over here, but it is failing over here. So can you see that this is actually saying that don't resolve any what to say, any JSP page, but in the same JSP page add field error. Okay, see what I'm trying to say. Let me first run again. So it is actually not going back to the stress and then resolving the view, because it is not efficient. It is simply saying wherever the request is coming from. Okay, this is the request. If I click on submit, in the same JSP page, okay, employee.action is being performed. It means, can you see this employee.action, employee info.action? It is saying first in this input, because this is the fresh form, if I am not entering any value, still it is, as you can see, it will call the employee dot information once, okay, then it will forward this request to the struts.xml, and it would tell you that okay, go to the employee class in this package and go to execute method and execute there. Okay, this is what is happening. Okay, so let me even for the wrong values, it would perform this action for once, okay, and then it would be inside the employee.java, it would be executing this object method, this validate method. But if it is failing, let's say for both the values, then it would not forward it to the stress.xml. It is saying simply add the field error in the same resource, whichever wherever you are. Here simply add a field, okay, simply add a field in the same view, simply add a field saying there is, the name is required and the age must be between 28 to 65. So this would make your application very very fast, okay, very very fast and very very efficient. So it would not resolve any further GSP page. In the same GSP page, it would show you all these errors. So we meant to discuss how to do form validation, okay, and when to use action interface, and when to use action support class. In simple terms, form validation is much necessary at the server side only when you want to do the form validation over the server side, this is actually recommended. Okay, because all these validation would take place at the server side only, and not all the time all the what to say, the form validation would be at the server side. Majority of the time, let's say if the validation is there, so 80-90% form validation would take place over the front end only. But if the request would come to the, let's say, the back end, then there are some chances that you would use form validation. Let's say you have taken the user and user id and the password. So what you can do, you can check in using this form validation, you can check whether they would exist in your database or not. You can do the same thing over here. Instead of checking this, you can check, okay, are they inside the database or not. So in that case, this form validation is required. But this is actually the server form validation, this is not the front end form validation, because this file would be executed by the container at the server, not at the front end. There is a difference. Majority of the times, I would say the 80-90%, all the form validation, all the input validation will be handled by the front end of your application. Okay, because it is very easy using the javascript, html and all. So it is very instant, very easy and very fast. But still, you sometime you require the form validation at the backend as well. For the detail, the client or the browser cannot resolve, or your front end cannot resolve. You have to, when you have to rely over the backend or some database, then you have to do the form validation using the server validation. This is called the server validation. This is we have done. When to use implement, sorry, the action interface, when you only need to do or perform your business logic. Definitely, as interface has only one method and few variables, and instead of action support, it would be having more function, more extended function over the action interface. And actually, action support is based on action interface. So this class is actually internally somehow implementing the action interface only, but it would provide you more complex operations, which would help you to compute fast. Okay, so in case when you only have the business logic but no validation, then go for action interface, which is very fast. But if you want to do the action, the validation part as well, along with the business logic, and there are many methods I have shown you. I think let me show you. So as you can see there, these are all such methods provided by the action support class. So it would be heavy, definitely inside the container. The object would take a lot of memory in the hash. Okay, so this is okay. So when you need business logic and your validation, then go for action support. And when you only need the business logic, then you can definitely go for action interface. So this is all for stress. So in your syllabus in fifth unit, this is we are done with the stress. In the next lecture, we will start with the EJB basics, and one more lecture. We have left with two lectures only. The first lecture would cover the basics of EJB, and the next lecture of the EJB would include all the theoretical aspects which would come into your exam. So if you have any doubt, you can comment down below. I would suggest you to come to this lecture and implement this code only when you have gone through my previous lecture and have implemented the previous assignment. Okay, again for this lecture, this what we have done today, you have to implement the same. You can find this practical in the Moodle itself. In go to the lab, Moodle lab for advanced Java programming, and there would be a practical 12 which is associated with this lecture. So once you complete this lecture, you have to finish the practical 12. Okay, so this would help us to perform and implement the projects accordingly. And also I will consider that practical 12 as the assignment for this lecture. Okay, for the previous one, the practical 11, and for this one, this would be the practical 12. You can find out the same this practical over the lab Moodle. Okay, and there will be a form attached to it which would help me to
get the data of all how many students have done the practical for each and individual unit. So for any doubt, you can comment down below and you can contact me. So thank you so much, guys, and have a good day.